Healthy Nation. Happy day of the week to you. I am Adrian. This is our Hegemony Explained series. We're going to be talking about hegemony. We're still focused on political hegemony and the psychology of why it's so effective. So we're going to take a look at sort of the process by which we tend to reinforce our existing beliefs rather than go out and explore new information and new perspectives. And the term for that today, as we've seen go to the extreme in social media, are our echo chambers. Yes, echo chambers. So this is essentially where we live these days, and hegemony has just gotten easier and easier because we're just constantly inundated with things that reinforce our own belief and charge us emotionally, so that we further think, how can anybody think the opposite of what I think, because clearly it's so visceral, I feel it. No, I know it to be true. And so echo chambers are actually making the problem much, much worse. They make political hegemony much, much easier. They make dividing and conquering all the more possible and very real today. So echo chambers and hegemony. Let's take a look at how it works, right, from a psychological perspective. We've mentioned in other videos the availability heuristic and the illusory truth effect, which sort of determine what we think is important. And so with that in mind, we have our original beliefs. What is important? What should I worry about? And how do I feel about those things? What are my actual opinions on those things? When we watch television, or I think very few people get their news from TV these days, probably all online, social media, however you get your information. You get your information, it has a political tilt to it, and we go through this process of self-rationalization afterwards. So, and then it cycles back up to our original beliefs. We've strengthened our original beliefs, we get some new information, we warp that new information to agree with what we've already believed, self-rationalize, and we're back at the beginning. So let's break down each of these steps. Our original beliefs, before we're able to critically reflect on the things that we learn, before we even have a reason to second guess reality, we just learn how the world works from lots of different sources, from school, from music, from TV and movies, from our parents, our teachers, our leaders and heroes. We trust these people, and why shouldn't we? Yes, we do. So we learn about how the world works and we believe it, because we have no reason not to. If it aligns with what we go out and see in our day-to-day lives, perfectly rational to believe what we're told here. So we get our minds filled before we're able to critically reflect on things. And once we have that, there's a principle known as conservatism and another one called anchoring, which are similar in that we are hesitant to change our minds. Once we have these original beliefs, any new information we receive is not weighted equally as the information we had at the beginning. It's weighted more, I don't want to say unfairly, it's given less weight than our original beliefs. Because whatever we think is what we think, we give that more weight than the new piece of information. Because why would we trust some new piece of information that's just come to us? We've thought what we've thought. It's got us this far in life. It's got us this far along. It must be right. See it every day in the world. So we trust our original beliefs more than we trust any new piece of information. That's anchoring and conservatism in a nutshell right there. So once we have our original beliefs and we receive new information, the way that it gets its political tilt through a couple of processes known as media agenda setting and framing, by which we're told what topics are important and how you feel about those topics. So the first bit here, agenda setting, sounds sinister. This is a real thing. It just means how they set their schedules, right? What was on the news? What are they going to talk about? What stories are they reporting on? That affects what we think is most important. And that is tied into the availability heuristic. So yeah, it circles all back there. The way they choose to schedule their time slots, it matters. They know what they're doing, they know what they're choosing to include, and they know what they're choosing to leave out. Second piece, closely related, media framing. The tone, vocabulary, and details that we use, the specific parts of the story that we include, and also the way that we phrase those parts of the story. It creates a predetermined range of acceptable emotional responses. if I told you that the way that you frame a story a certain way, we'll just go with reality right now. If I told you that there are insurrectionists who stormed the Capitol because they believe that the election was stolen by an oligarchical deep state that is denying them their voice. I blended both of the frames there, so I'll step back. If I told you that there were insurrectionists that stormed the Capitol because they were pissed off about the results of the elections, being sore losers, couldn't accept defeat, so they stormed the Capitol to overthrow democracy, that creates a pretty narrow set of predetermined, acceptable emotional responses. There's only a certain amount of ways you can feel about that story, right? You can't empathize as much with people when it's framed that way. We look like we're lagging and moving and shaking here. I'll try to slow it down. If I were to frame the story another way and say that an oligarchical deep state just rigged the election, stole the people's voice, denying them their right to a democratically elected leader, and so a mob of people democratically got together to overthrow this oppressive authoritarian regime. That creates a whole other set of predetermined acceptable emotional responses, because now you empathize with the people that are storming the Capitol because they are the ones protecting democracy. And in the first frame, you empathize with people inside the Capitol because they're the ones protecting democracy. So the exact same series of events with two very different frames creates two very different potential emotional responses. So that's framing. Back here, and my computer's working hard, so we won't have it lag on my face anymore. We'll stick to these pretty pictures. The framing sort of ties into a selective perception and confirmation bias on the reporter side. There's a combination, again, as with all hegemony, of willful and sort of unconscious bias in how people are reporting things. So genuinely, there are news reporters on CNN and there are news reporters on Fox News that interpret these events differently. And so it's their own selective perception and confirmation bias that affects the way they tell us the story. So there's one layer of these psychological biases before the story even gets to us, and we apply our own psychological biases to it, which is the very next step here. The final step is our self-rationalization. Here we have our nice helmet of anchoring in conservatism. Thank you. Nothing to do with being on the right, being a conservative or being a Democrat, literal, whatever it is. It just means we are conservative in our beliefs. We like to hold on to the beliefs we already have. We're hesitant to change. Anchoring, we value our initial position more than we value movement. So that is our nice helmet that protects us from the rain of contrary information. We have our selective perception and confirmation bias. Everything that we hear goes through these filters that tell us what we want to hear, rather than what the person is saying. The Demos's reflex is a real interesting phenomenon, which just it describes our tendency when we hear something that is just radically different to how we think and behave. We outright reject it. We say no, thanks. Out reject it. So it gets a name from a physician, Ignaz Semmelweis, and Ignaz, he was a doctor in like a couple decades before germ theory was a thing that was well understood, and he noticed that there was a super high infant mortality rates wherever he was, and he realized it was because that doctors were working on cadavers, dead bodies, doing all their stuff, and then they'd go into the next room and they would deliver a baby without washing their hands. And so, touching dead bodies, touching newborn babies, that was the cause of this extremely high infant mortality rate. Ignaz realized he could have a little solution. It was like a little lemon juice, like a little sanitary situation. Just wash your hands. Wash your hands after you touch a dead body before you go deliver a baby. So he presented this research to the scientific community, and they weren't just like, you solved it. Thanks, Ignaz. I was curious about that. They said, fuck no. Sorry, excuse my language. They said, absolutely not. We don't want that. We don't care about that. You are wrong. A gentleman's hands cannot carry disease. That's what they believed. Death, life and death is God's wish. That's it. If somebody died, it's God's will. It wasn't my fault. I'm a gentleman. I can't carry, disease on my hands. So that's what they genuinely believed. So they said, nope, Semmelweis, you're wrong. Hence the name Semmelweis reflex. Going back to our self-rationalization graphic here, we have subjective validation, choice supportive bias, and congruence bias. Similar, but different. There's a little more nuance there. Really, it's more ways to affirm our existing belief. Choice supportive bias and subjective validation. We sort of cherry pick evidence. We go out and cherry pick evidence to support what we already believe. And then the difference there between selective perception and confirmation bias is sort of whatever we hear, we filter out things we disagree with and retain the things that we do agree with, or we put our own spin to make it something that we agree with. So I am no psychologist. I'm an engineer, studying communications as well. I love that cross of technical humanities right there. But I've just, you take psychology classes, sociology classes, and you learn these things. And hegemony is one of those things you can't just learn and move on with your life. So I'm not a psychologist, and I don't want to pretend to be. So if my descriptions of these are flawed, please correct me, because it's all about learning together, getting a good idea, wrapping our heads around this together. But I just wanted to create this list and tie hegemony to the psychological heuristics that make it possible and unavoidable, because that's something that I felt was a missing link. We don't understand why it's so effective, why we continue to believe things that we see on the news and fall victim to these echo chambers. So that's our starting point. Right here is our beautiful graphic. That's probably this one. Not quite. It's this one. So this is what we do. We just cycle through that. It's our echo chamber world these days. But it's alright, because understanding it is the first step to not avoiding it. Because again, I say unavoidable, but catching it when it happens. You can experience it and then realize, should I question this? Am I using my lazy brain thinking to have it go through all these subconscious filters? Or am I actually critically thinking about this? Critical thinking. Very important. So, that has been Hegemony Explained. A little look at the circuit of how we process information and why hegemonic echo chambers are so effective in our modern day. Hope you enjoyed, Wealthy Nation. See you next time.